Thank you. Good seeing you all again. No. Can a man be polite? What does it take? All right. What I want to talk to you about today is if we have to have a rhetorical situation, I want you to think that I'm representing one of America's heavy engine manufacturers, believe it or not, and I want you to be an audience at an environmental conference, and we're having a breakout session talking about emissions regulations and how that's affected a lot of Americans' lives every day. Now, if you think, America has sort of gone through a paradigm shift. We're cleaning up our act. We're reducing the amount of coal-fired power plants that we have. There's catalytic converters on our cars now. People don't smoke inside anymore. We're not dumping toxic wastewater down our sewers. So the same can be said for the diesel engine industry. We're not exempt from any of these regulations. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4. I don't want to say they're all the same, but what this is a graduation. As you go through Tier 1, we're going to cut out nitrous oxide emissions. When you get to Tier 2, we're going to cut out other harmful components like carbon monoxide. And we'll get to that in a second. But if you would do me the honor, I want you to consider a couple of objects that you come in contact with every day. And I promise we're not going to talk about lead poisoning, asbestosis, mesothelioma, or asphyxiation. But rather, I want you to think about common items like the light bulb, like the automobile, like the train, and like the computer. What's happened to the light bulb over the past 100 years? You can't say that they're the same thing. On the one hand, you have an incandescent bulb circa 1900 that's more efficient at producing heat than it is producing light. Today, we have compact fluorescent tubes. They're probably 5 times the price, but they use less energy. They put out a little less light, but hey, they get the job done, and our environment's better for it. Consider the automobile. Around the turn of the century, you had Henry Ford, and he's made famous by the assembly line, and what came off of that but the Model T? Now, I don't know the top speed of the Model T, could probably do 60 miles an hour downhill with the wind at its back on a good day. Consider the Mustang. If you went out and you spent $50,000 on a brand new Mustang, you could probably do 140 miles an hour. You could have the AC running, the stereo going, and you'd probably get better fuel economy than the Model T would at 35 miles an hour. Consider the train. Now we don't have steam locomotives chuffing down our railways, but now we have smooth electric Amtrak Acela locomotives going up and down the eastern seaboard, not burning a whole lot of energy, certainly not burning any fossil fuels, but again, the change is apparent. And the last example, consider the computer, and consider the government, the US government's computing power at the end of World War II. Around that time, there's a computer called the UNIVAC, and it had hundreds of vacuum tubes. And you want to talk about producing heat like the light bulb, just multiply that times 100 and then pair that with the computing power with, that would probably be less than the wristwatch that you're wearing, and now you have the UNIVAC computer. I would be surprised if no less than 50% of you had the iPhone in your pocket today. If you could show that to someone 60 years ago, they would be blown away. They wouldn't believe it. They would think you were sent by ancient aliens or something. They wouldn't buy it. So, anyways. What I want to step through today are 4 key innovations that the diesel industry, not limited to Caterpillar, not limited to Cummins, John Deere, Kubota, Komatsu, all of them have had to adopt these innovations. But again, the environment's a better place for it. Don't get scared when I pull this down. It's going to seem like some esoteric acronyms, but it's not bad. We're going to step through this quickly. The first point I want to make is about exhaust gas recirculation. Now, you might have heard about this before. It was very popular during the 1970s. Even gasoline engine manufacturers had to adopt this. But really, all it was something to appease the EPA. In fact, it made cars less efficient. So while the exhaust doesn't pollute as much, you're burning more fossil fuels, so really, who wins in the end? No one. So with Tier 1 regulations, the manufacturers have had to step up and actually make exhaust gas recirculation meaningful and useful and stop wasting their customers' fuel. So consider that you have a recycling company and you go around a residential neighborhood and you pick up all the cardboard. Well, let's see, you claim you're a recycling company, but if you took that cardboard in the back of your dump truck and dumped it in the river, are you borrowing from Peter to pay Paul? Are you really doing anyone a favor? Absolutely not, but you're also missing out on some profit. If you were to turn that cardboard into pulpwood, you could sell it on. By the same token, if we take exhaust gas from the engine, recycle it through the engine, lower the internal combustion temperatures in the cylinders, burn less fuel, and harm the environment less, hey, everyone's winning on that regard. Let's talk about a diesel particulate filter. If for some reason the exhaust gas recirculator doesn't do quite the job that it should have, thank God for diesel particulate filters. Now this item is installed in the exhaust pipe or the exhaust stack, whichever you prefer, depending upon the application. Again, depending upon the application, they're normally about this big, about this much. And all this is it captures particulate matter, carbon, unburnt fuel, and it can sort of be compared to, excuse my example, but if you ever get behind a truck and you see it sooty, the particulate matter in the air here is not so different from what you have coming out of a dump truck that doesn't have his fuel pump set correctly. It's not so different from a ship leaving a black plume of smoke while it's going down the waterway. It's harmful to the environment, it's carcinogenic, and it'll hurt your lungs and reduce your lifespan. So a diesel particulate filter is on your side because what it does is it captures that soot and it incinerates it. And if for some reason that incineration isn't enough to appease the EPA, to make your lungs breathe easier, to make you a healthier individual, which it all does, you have what's called diesel exhaust fluid. Diesel exhaust fluid is now readily available at any truck stop, at any Walmart you go to, maybe not any convenience store, but to any hardcore diesel operator or anyone that makes their living, makes their bottom line off of burning diesel fuel, they'll have a ready supply of diesel exhaust fluid. It's cheap, it's easy to come by, and if you look closely at 18-wheelers going down the road when you're on the interstate, a lot of times you'll see there's a little blue cap next to their fuel tank. That's for diesel exhaust fluid. All it is a tiny injector that goes into the exhaust plenum, it sprays, and it mitigates any nitrous oxide that's left over. Now the final point I want to make to you is an innovation called common rail direct injection. It's been about 10 years since it's really gotten a foothold. The technology's been around for a long time, but again, because of the expense of adopting these new and innovative technologies, it's taken a while for the engine manufacturers to catch on. That's not the case anymore because they're forced to. If they don't, then they can't produce engines, they won't pass emissions regulations. So I have a little diagram on the board, and the first diagram that I want you to consider is this one on top. What you have here are 4 cylinders. You have a fuel pump, and you've got a line that runs to each one of them. Now that's called a rotary fuel pump. There's a lot of mechanics involved in it. There's a lot of friction. There's a lot of heat generated. There's a lot of thermal efficiency that's lost. It's a complicated procedure, and you have to be a specialist to work on one. This fuel is injected at about 200 psi. Now remember that figure, because when we talk about common rail direct injection, you have what is a much less complicated diagram. We have fuel that is now injected at 20,000 psi. So there's just a line that runs into the cylinder. It's actuated by an electronic injector, and because it's injected at such a high pressure, the fuel atomizes better. To help you imagine how this works, I want you to consider that you have a spray bottle. I'm going to throw this disclaimer out. Do not try this at home. I feel like I'm at the beginning of Tosh Puno. Whatever you see, don't try it at home because you'll get hurt. But you take this squirt bottle and you set it to stream. And you have it full of gasoline, and there's a candle sitting over there on the table. And you pump that squirt bottle, and that stream of gas hits the candle, and there's a big explosion, a lot of smoke, but it's not burning completely. Now imagine if you took that nozzle and you set it to spray, and you walked up to it, again, don't do this, and you sprayed it, and there would be a huge fireball, but there wouldn't be much smoke because the fuel has atomized correctly. It's burning more completely. So what that means for the operator is not only is he not polluting less, but his bottom line has become bigger because he's using less fuel. And fuel is a big percentage, it's a big cost of any operation that relies heavily upon diesel fuel. So to sum things up, so we don't forget our acronyms, we have exhaust gas recirculation, diesel particulate filter, the diesel exhaust fluid, and common rail direct injection. All innovations that help keep the diesel engine relevant today and keep it going in the 21st century. Thank you.